So some of you may know, I'm a big believer that life itself is art. I think that there is a hypothetical scenario in which you could say that life is an art form even. Just do a quick rundown, I guess, start this off of why I believe this. If the definition of art is the expression or application of human creative skill or imagination, then you can express and apply both your imagination and creative skill to your own life. I think the easiest way that I think of this in like my head to understand it is sort of like a sculpture, right? Just how like a sculptor starts out with a big block that can kind of become anything, and through each curve they decide to add on or not add on, each tool they decide to apply or not apply, they can turn this rock into more or less anything they want. You can do the same thing with your life. You know, it ends up being a sculpture. I've even said too before that I think that like, as much as it's not, I don't think there's a scenario in which you could make this consumable, and this is going to be a big caveat for today. There is hypothetically, or I guess like theoretically, a life artist exists. Somebody whose medium itself is just living life, and the creation that comes out of that is not a sculpture or a painting, but rather just their own lived experiences and the either worldview or simply the life that comes out of that. So I do think that that is, like, these are things I believe to establish this conversation, right? And as I was forming these beliefs, it was a time as I was sort of coming off of social media, like a good amount, personal social medias. Obviously, you're watching this on YouTube, I still upload here, but I don't have any personal social medias anymore. I've talked about this a good amount. And like, I think sort of coming off of social media and developing these ideas at the same time was very interesting, because it made me sort of look at social media as like, wait, is this the consumption of life as art? This is something I also thought about a ton in my video on if social media and content and videos are art. And I had two ways I could go on with that video when I first started it. This was back in almost a year ago exactly now. I was starting that video and I was like, okay, I could either talk about one of two things. I could talk about the fact that, like, yeah, it's art because I set up the cameras and I edited the video and I color graded it. And I used typography and graphic design to make the thumbnail, like XYZ, the fairly intuitive, obvious way in which this is art. Or I could go the other direction that I ended up not taking because I thought it was a little bit too... Well, one, because I didn't have an interesting conclusion about it. That's the first big reason. And two, because I think it's a little bit more theoretical, a little bit more vapid, and better suited just to have an interesting conversation about, because I think there's a lot of ways you could take it. And that's this idea that, if I'm saying I think there is a hypothetical life artist that exists, is social media just the way in which we consume these life artists? We're all familiar with the stereotype of the influencer that, like, all the old people have, right? That, like, oh, it's just somebody with a camera that is famous for no reason. Which is funny, because, in reality, as much as I'm not going to deny those people exist, like, it's like the 1% of influencers. You know how hard it is to just pick up a camera and be famous for no reason? Like, the fact that people think that can just happen is crazy. Most influencers are, like, so talented at what they do and put in so much more work than, like, the average celebrity, because they're in charge of everything they do. This isn't even me I'm not an influencer by any means. I'm talking about, like I've known people that are, like, way better at this stuff than I am, and they put in a lot of work, you know what I mean? It's definitely not for no reason that these people end up doing well, but that's a side tangent, that's besides the point. This very small class of people, we'll call them like the kind of Instagram model section of influencers who really are just famous because they went viral and are famous for no reason, Are these life artists? Like, lifestyle influencers? I think actually I want to change what I said. I don't think the Instagram model is probably a good way of looking at that, because they're models. They're just models who use social media in the same way that, Mr. Beast is a game show host using social media. and like, you know, political commentators, like talk radio hosts using social media. Like, a lot of things have a very much like a one-to-one, like, oh, this is how old media became new media. The lifestyle influencers, I think, is probably the better example here of like the influencer that just is famous for living their life. Are they like life artists? Like, are they somebody who, by making creative actions and living a life that's interesting and worth watching, have made something interesting and made their life into art to watch? I think this is the most interesting question that I was thinking about back then, and I had some problems with it. Because when I think of like a lifestyle vlogger, somebody who, like, you know, maybe doesn't do one thing in specific, but kind of just did whatever. Like, I think of somebody like a David Dobrik, who I never really watched too much of, but I remember my friends watched a lot of him, and I didn't really get the appeal, but they were like, he's got a nice group of friends, and, you know, he's fun to watch, is kind of always what they said the appeal of him was, right? No hate towards David Dobrik. I don't even think I've watched a David Dobrik video, to be honest. I just never got into it, but he's somebody who I very much view in that vein of, like, this is somebody who is just famous for, like, the life that they live. Or lived, I guess, now. I don't think he makes videos anymore. Casey Neistat's another great example of this. And the reason I think I ended up not putting it in that video is because I don't think that is... I think there's something that's weird about that, being like, the art there is their life, because it's kind of not. Like, I think the art is more in the camera work and how they curate their life to be interesting. Like, I would be willing to bet that much less people would be interested in how David Dobrik lives his life if he didn't edit it down to a 4-minute vlog every day. Like, I think if there was a 24-hour live stream of David Dobrik, and he just, like, kept going and did the same stuff, but didn't edit any of it, like, I think it wouldn't be nearly as interesting. And same with, like, a Casey Neistat, who did his daily vlogs for years, and it was the way he lived his life is what appealed to people. I think he's more of a director than even, you know, somebody who's just making their life into art. Their life is the subject of what they direct, but these people, I think, are more akin to a filmmaker than this idea of a life artist, this, like, hypothetical idea that might not be consumable. There's this one other thing, though, that I thought about back then that I still think about sometimes. Whenever I see my friends who are still on, like, social medias, like, actively using them, like Snapchat or whatever, the way that they'll just pull out their phone, take a photo of what they're doing, and send it to people, I think is so interesting. Because on the one hand, I'm encouraged right away to jump to this idea of, like, no, that's photography. You know, as much as, yes, that's hypothetically, based on the definition of art, a piece of art, technically that's just photography, right? Because the taking the photo is the art. But I think it's more artistic, the action of just taking a photo of the most mundane thing you're doing and sending it to everybody you know. I think that is more of the art piece of that. And, you know, like, the way that social media makes social interaction work is by sort of having us send around our lives, right? In terms of personal social media. Of course, something like me doing this is very different. You guys see a very small portion of me in comparison to the rest of the time that I exist, and I, quite frankly, do prefer it that way. I think that's, like, one of the reasons I don't have personal social media. I don't want to feel like my life exists for anyone but me. But social media, when you do have it on a personal basis, is sort of taking your life and beaming it to everybody, and that's how the social interaction works, is you taking somebody else's life and consuming their life, right? So I think that, like, in order for, going back now, off that, right, to our hypothetical idea of this quote-unquote life artist, who's somebody whose art is their own life based on the decisions and actions they've made. The struggle with this person existing is that, like, kind of a tree falling over in the woods scenario. You could say that exists till you're blue in the face. I don't know if you could ever actually consume that, though, unless you are that person, or maybe, you know, they're life partner or something, you know? The only way you could consume it is if you're, one, near them basically 24/7, and two, able to see the parts of their life that make it art, right? Even though all of our lives are art, technically, so are we all life artists? I don't know, because I think an essential part of the life artist is that they don't actually have another outlet of art, right? Or can they? I don't know, I think this conception's really interesting. I think my problem with this might be the idea that we don't have... I don't think my definition of a life artist is right. Because what I'm trying to get at here, the main point that I've done actually a pretty terrible job today of explaining, so sorry for that, is this idea that social media has made us turn all of our lives into a very consumable form of art. Whereas seeing the intricacies in this hypothetical life artist, this like concept that I think should have been its own paint and talk before I came here today. I think that's what needed to happen. Seeing the intricacies of that would be far too complicated and too almost subtle to ever truly consume. I think social media has equipped us all to turn our lives into art, which is part of the reason why it sucks so much, because some life, you know, you're not meant to consume the life artist's art. And I do believe in what I'm saying in terms of, like, there is a conception of this hypothetical person. Like, I think that person exists. I think they have to. I think I've met people that doesn't have a direct outlet for art, but their life in itself is art because they look at it with a creative guise. But I don't think that this is like... I don't think this is a person as much as it's an idea. Like, you could say there is the painter, right? Using the word the painter, like the perfect quintessential painter, right? And all other painters exist in his shadow. Kind of like a World of Form scenario, where it's like there is a perfect conception of a painter and all other painters exist under that umbrella. Like, everybody that picks up a paintbrush and paints is a painter. However, they're not the greatest painter. They're not the quintessential painter, because that's an impossible metric to define. I think all of us, by proxy of living our lives, are creating some form of art with it by just the action of living, but we are not the life artist. But I think social media has made us present that as if we are. I don't know. I think I lost the plot today, guys. I'm going to be honest. I think this is possibly my first major L on Paint and Talk, where I just did not have a good enough point. I don't know, because I'd really like your thoughts on this, because I think maybe one, I should have written some of this down today. I think this was too complicated an idea. I just remembered I always wanted to talk about it because of that video they tried to make on if social media is art, right? But I think there's more to it than... I'm thinking of. We're gonna have to circle back to this one, guys. I say that a lot, but this is a topic where genuinely I want your thoughts on, and we're gonna circle back on, because this is interesting, and I know it's interesting. I just did an absolutely terrible job at explaining it. But hey, that's the beauty of Paint and Talk, is sometimes I come here and I have something. Maybe someone will find something interesting in like a certain sentence I said and have a comment that makes me be able to see something that I'm not seeing, and that's why I love doing this series. But it also means that it comes with doing this daily. I'm up to like this, where it's like, ouch, didn't explain much there. This is the painting. I like the colors a lot on this. I want to do sort of a deconstructed hand that doesn't feel complete. Like, I want to feel sort of like a mirage of a hand. Almost a reflection of today's conversation, where like it feels like there should be a point, but there's just nothing actually there. Man. Yeah, I like it though. So go follow me on Instagram. This will be up later this week. And until next time, guys, gals, until next time, let me know your thoughts down below in this conversation, because I need them this time. But truly, until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Matt Zeiss. This is Paint Talk episode 143. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all. I stuttered there because when I said 143, I thought of the Katy Perry album, And I was like, maybe there's a joke somewhere in there, like bad album, bad episode of Pain Talk. Like maybe I could shoulder some of the blame to Katy Perry, but I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't think there's an angle there.